And then in terms of where do people need the most help, verbal seems to be really popular. About 77% of you need help in SC, very similar percentage in CR, slightly fewer in RC, and then Quant I see advanced topics is the most popular. And then after that, we have number properties and word problems that are kind of equally popular or so. So that's really good. Um, just I'm going to put in the chat part for usually I don't enable chat when we have that many people, but I'm going to enable it for a few minutes and say, okay, what are your takeaways from the data on this on the right hand side? I mean, do you see people who are like you who need help in the same areas as you do? Are you surprised by any of these data points? Verbal is the main pain point, absolutely, yes. Can't get confidence in the verbal section. Verbals, I would say, if you focus, verbal's easy. If you don't focus, verbal becomes really challenging. Um, and so that's something that's there. So verbal is something which the good news is and we're now in the webinar pane, the core pane of the webinar. The screen should have changed for you, and let me put in the Q&A part as well. Q&A stands for question and answer. So you should be seeing a pod that's right at the bottom of your screen, which says Q&A. So just from a logistic standpoint, I'm going to come back on verbal versus quant overall. So what you see in the center is what we call as the presentation pod. That's the screen that says, or that's the pod that says, how do you score 95th percentile or better on the GMAT? On the right hand side, where someone has said, hi, I'm from Bangladesh, that's the area where I ask questions and you put in your answers. So the pod that you see over there is a short answer pod. There are times when I'll bring in other polls. My goal over here is to make this session fairly interactive. So you'd see me bring in a yes no poll many a times during the session. So essentially, you'll see lots of polls come on the right hand side. This is an area where I ask questions and you respond. Okay, this is not an area for your questions. On below the presentation pod, you have a Q&A pod. That's an area where you can post a question. This is a queue, which means that when you post a question, it goes in a queue, and when we respond to it, we can really say the question's been responded to, so that way it goes out of the queue. So that way we keep track of all questions get responded. The other good thing about this is you post a question there, Mansi can take that question on without and that way we still go through the session and get done in about a couple of hours or so. So yeah, so if you have a question, post it in the Q&A pod. Refrain from posting it in the short answer pod, because yeah, I've seen people do that, and that at times disturbs the flow of the session. Okay, so let me just go through the agenda once more, and for those of you worried about verbal, one thing that I'll say is focus on learning. Don't focus on a score. If you focus on learning when it comes to GMAT verbal, you'll find the score happens automatically. If you focus just on the score, which means if you focus on learning tricks, your score will not improve. And we're going to demonstrate that in this session briefly. Okay, so just three parts of this webinar. We're going to talk about in the beginning, what does the GMAT actually test? And this is where you're going to see if you infer this right, what you're going to really see is when it comes to acing the GMAT, you've got to focus on learning things, because essentially GMAT's not a test that you can trick or rather use some strategies to excel on it without building those fundamentals. So we're going to talk about how does the GMAT work, then we're going to transition to the study plan, and then we're going to really say how should you execute that study plan. So we're going to keep it very, very simple. In each one of these parts or sections, we will have multiple takeaways. Now you will get this presentation at the end, so that's something I want to tell you. But it's good practice still to take notes. I am of a very strong opinion that if you write down while learning, those things get cemented in your brain, and that way you remember them, you practice them in your day-to-day life. So feel free to write things down, but also know that you'll get the presentation. Okay, let me move the yes and no part away. Okay, now With this, we're now into the first part of the presentation. And there's one thing that I want you guys to know about acing the GMAT is this one thing, which is about when it comes to getting to that 730, 740, 770, 780 score, it's about having that ability to get there. And the reason why I want to emphasize on this is it's really important is that while preparing for the GMAT, a lot of us focus on this piece. How many of you focus on timing and really say, okay, you're 15 days into preparing for the GMAT and you're really saying, oh, I'm taking 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes to answer questions. How many of you focus on that? And yes, we are live. So yes, um, wrong time to focus on those things. You want to focus on timings when you are 20, 25 days away, if by that time you have a timing issue. Everyone's going to have a timing issue when they're preparing, when in what I call as the first 60% of the GMAT preparation. Why? Because if you're doing it right, you're learning new things. And when you're learning new things, you are bound to take longer. That's kind of the hallmark of learning something new. If you're not learning anything new, you're not going to take longer on doing that. But if you're learning something new, you are going to take longer. That's the characteristic of learning, right? It shows that you still have to learn, and so you're going to take longer. So this is timing on the test important? Absolutely. Is timing during the first 60% of your preparation important? No, not at all. What you need to focus on is learning. A lot of people focus on, okay, I'm going to start taking mocks in the first 3 weeks itself so that I get accustomed to taking mocks. And just in the first 3 weeks, rather than focusing on learning, they focus on, hey, which section should I look at, which questions should I skip, and so on and so forth. How am I going to build this stamina? Again, important in the last 1 month once you're done with your preparation, not important in the beginning. How many of you do this? Let me just erase the short answer part. How many of you do this? Focus on taking mocks right within the first 20 days, just to say, hey, how much have I improved? Let's just figure that out. And again, be honest about it. Yes, bad strategy. And I'll show you a statistic later on during the webinar where you'll see since January of 2021, and I use a statistic since January of 2021 because when people see the number of reviews that e-GMAT has, they say, hey, you've been a partner for a decade, and so you have these many reviews. So we've stopped saying we have close to 2,500 reviews. But since 2021, we've accounted for 3 out of every 5 700 plus scores reported. So 60% of all 700 plus scores reported on GMAT Club, and the other 4 out of 5, 2 out of 5 or 40%, the remaining 7 partners combined have done that. And I can tell you, our students don't focus on timing during the first 60% of their preparation. Okay, you should take a mock before starting to know where you stand, and our students don't focus on taking mocks throughout their preparation. So just I'm going to show some stuff, and this is something that you can verify. The data is out on GMAT Club. So when it comes to acing the GMAT, focus on building ability. That's the good news. Why? Because essentially you focus on doing things that you all know. All of you are aiming for the GMAT because you guys are smart. You guys are probably in the top tier in your stream, the top 30% in your respective careers. So that's something that I want to make sure that you guys are smart. You guys, the reason why you are where you are is because of that smartness, and then you've got to use that smartness, build ability, and you should be able to ace the GMAT. Okay, when you haven't read anything, is it good to take a mock? So what my philosophy usually is that if everyone has the official guide, and the official guide there are certain practice questions, which is the official guide has a diagnostic. Take that diagnostic as a warm up, and then take one of the good mocks. So I recommend people to take a Sigma X mock. Why? Because that's the only mock in the world uh, that 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 usually gives you your abilities, which help you define your study plan. And you'll see some of this. But again, take the diagnostic test. It gets you warmed up, and then beyond that, take a mock, because first mock the role of that first mock is to kind of really tell you what is it that you're naturally good at and what is it that you naturally need to improve. And that's kind of where you want to take it semi raw. You don't want to take it completely raw, but semi raw, where you're aware of the question types, and then you go in and take the mocks. Okay. Mansi, can you please share the link to the Sigma X mock with everyone? That would be great. Actually, I think I have it in one of the links. How many mocks should you take? We'll answer that question later on in this. So we have a link to Sigma X mock. That's the link number 1 that you see over here. You can click on this link. I can really open this for many of you. So so yeah, we offer 1 mock free of charge that you can take. So I'm going to erase this question. Please put this question in the Q&A pod. That way it remains in the queue, and we can answer this question later on. Okay. Now, I want to talk about one other thing when it comes to the GMAT. This term called accuracy over here. A lot of us, when we start, and I'm just throwing some terms at you. I'm going to explain why they're important in about 2 minutes or so. Accuracy is a very simple term. We all love it because of the simplicity. What's accuracy? When it comes to, let's say we take a 10-question quiz and we get 8 out of those 10 questions right, so we say our accuracy is 80%. Okay, so that's accurate. It's a very simple metric. It's very easy to compute, and the reason why I have this over here is because while preparing for the GMAT, we measure accuracy, and I've seen people look at accuracy like a hawk, and it's a good metric to measure. The only place where accuracy is not as great a metric is when you're solving official guide questions, and some people really say that, hey, I got my accuracy on the OG is about 80%. Whereas when I take my mock test, I end up scoring a V27, V30, V32. Are there people over here who do that? And again, the reason why I say it's a good measure but not a great measure when you do that is because accuracy, what I call, is an absolute measure, which means that you took that 10-question quiz, you got 8 questions right, 80% accuracy. On paper, it looks good. On the other hand, if 100 people take that 10-question quiz and half of them get 8 or more correct, then your ability in that 10-question quiz is 50th percentile, which means translate that to your verbal score. That leads to about a V29 or so. So that 80% accuracy doesn't tell you anything. It's not a comparative number. The entire GMAT is about a comparative number. So accuracy in OG, without taking into context the difficulty level of questions, it doesn't tell you anything. Okay. The measure that you should really focus on is what we call as ability, which is a comparative measure. And on the GMAT, an ability is not an abstract measure where you say, hey, my ability in this place is good. Ability is a measure that the GMAT actually, or a metric that the GMAT actually measures. It assigns a score to you. If you've seen the ESR, you've seen your ability scores in SCCR, RC, arithmetic, and algebra. In fact, your GMAT score is an ability score of 760 is 99 percentile. That's an ability score. It tells you how good you are compared to others. Your score of 700 is what, 88 percentile. It's an ability score. It shows how good you are compared to other test takers. So, yeah. So yeah. How accurate is the Sigma X mock? It's actually better than the official mock. You go look at GMAT Club's review section, you'll see people talk about, it's within 20 points of your people's actual GMAT score. So with that, let's kind of make sure you understand how the GMAT works. And some of you may already know some of it. I want to make sure you have the right takeaways from this. Okay. So what I'm going to do is we're going to simulate test taking for 2 students over here. We're going to call them case 1, case 2, or student 1, student 2. Okay. Now we have 2 axes here. On the x-axis, we have question number. So as you see, 1 to 5 is going from question number 1 to question number 5. And on the y-axis, we have difficulty level of questions. So the higher we go on y-axis, the more difficult the question becomes. So this is difficult, and this is easy. Just to really tell you over here. So that's kind of a piece over here. So let's start with student 1. Student 1, or case 1, gets the first question right. That's why he gets a second question, which is of a higher difficulty level. You can see we're going higher on y-axis, which means as you go from 1 to 2, questions become more difficult. Gets a second question right as well. Then gets a third question, which is even more challenging. And remember, y-axis is the difficulty axis. The higher you go on y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. Because this question is that difficult, the person doesn't probably have the ability, gets the question wrong. Gets the fourth question, which is a slightly easier question. Now you can really see this is your question number 4, and if you draw horizontal lines from question number 2 and question number 3, you can see it's between question number 4 is between those horizontal lines here. Gets the fourth question right, gets the fifth question, which is a bit more challenging, gets that question wrong. So student 1 case, when you're going to just simulate it till question number 5, that's all that we need uh, to demonstrate how the test works. Let's look at student 2 or case 2. Student 2 gets the first question. Again, just for simplicity, it's the same median difficulty level. This is, you can see this is the average difficulty line over here. Gets that question wrong. Gets a second question, which is slightly easier. You can see we're going down on the y-axis, which means questions become easy. Gets that right. Gets a third question, which is a bit more challenging. So that's why we're going up over here on the y-axis. In this case, gets that right. Gets that wrong, I'm sorry. Gets the fourth question, which is slightly easier, gets that right, and gets the fifth question right as well. So I'm going to simulate only till question number 5, and I'm going to stop the test over here, and I'm going to see who's doing better. So if I were to ask you this question, who do you think is doing better? And here is a poll question. What would you say? Is it student 1 or student 2? Okay, please put your responses in the poll question. At the end of question number 5, who is doing better? 3. I have about 100 students here. Can we get at least 60 responses? I have about 41 responses. Who is doing better at the end of question number 5? If I were to end the test and say, this is all you got to do. These are all the scores that you get. Question number 5, who's doing better? All right, I have 60 responses, 61. Good. Let me end the poll. 62. One of the things that I want to tell people is, I know you've taken the time out to spend time with us. It's your Saturday morning, Saturday evening, depending on the time zone that you're in. The best way to get out most out of the session is by participating. Why? Because there's no one who's judging you here. This is what I call as a zero risk environment, and the only way, the only thing that you can do from here is either waste your time or you can gain from this, and the best way to gain from this is participate. So by participating, you gain, and you can see 83% of you say it's student 1, and you guys are absolutely right. Student 1 is definitely doing better, student 2 than student 2. Now, both of them have identical accuracies. Both of them have answered 3 out of 5 questions correctly. The key thing over here is, why is it that student 1 has done better or would get a higher score if I were to stop the test at question number 5? Why do you think student 1 would get a higher score? You can type your answer in the short answer pod, press enter. When you press enter, I would get the answer. You don't see that, you don't see it on the screen because I'm not broadcasting results. So the moment I broadcast results, you're going to see your responses there. Okay. All right, I've gotten some really good answers because you've answered more difficult questions, the ability to solve more difficult questions. He's answering tougher questions, the difficulty level. I like this over here. And because one thing that it clearly shows is that you guys understand when it comes to a higher score on the GMAT, you've got to get more difficult questions right. Okay, that's really important for you to understand. The ability to get difficult questions right is what gets you to that 700 plus score, which 95% of you are aiming for. Okay, now I want to ask this one question. Observe this. Did the test even serve difficult questions to student 2? Just look at this. This is your average difficulty line over here, right? Did the test even serve difficult questions? No. No, the test did not serve difficult questions to students. So when it comes to the opportunity um, to solve difficult questions, student 2 didn't even get the opportunity to solve difficult questions. Why? Because he didn't do well on the earlier questions. That's something which I think is a really important takeaway that I want you to have. So when it comes to practicing on the GMAT, you've got to build that ability throughout. No, you've got to be able to solve difficult questions correctly. But, of course, the only way you'd get this is if you solve medium questions right, medium difficulty questions right with high consistency. Now, how many of you over here have hired someone Okay, I'm gonna no, not studying, but hired someone as in to work for you. Hired many. Okay, not yet. Just for anything, just a person. Have hired a person. All right, not hired. Some of you have, but most of you have gone through an interview process, hired for your organization that or your own company. Yes. So the way that GMAT works is very similar to how you would work if you were to hire someone. And if you understand that, you'd understand how the GMAT works, and it'll help you decide how to prepare for the GMAT. So let's say in an organization there are 5 levels. Okay, you have a middle level, which is actually you have a middle level which is that of a director. You have VP, and then you have above that EVP, executive vice president. Below the director you have manager. Just I'm going to keep things very simple. Even 5 I think is a bit complex, but I think we need that analyst. And at the bottom is your analyst over here. Now let's say that the way the GMAT works is you have this candidate over here, and you want to figure out where to fit this candidate. And so the best way to figure out where to fit this candidate is, all of you can see the whiteboard, right? Just type yes. You can see EVP, VP, my horrible handwriting. I'm sorry that you have to suffer through this, but that's what you got to live with. So good. So if a couple of you can't see, just join again. And sometimes if you're on a slower connection, things take time. When you join again, you reset that connection, and things work. So uh, um, so essentially, let's say you want to hire for let's say you want to figure out where to place a user. So the easiest strategy for you would be to really say, let's kind of ask director level questions. I'm going to ask this director level questions here. Now, if the person answers those questions correctly, what are you going to do? If the person answers director level questions correctly, you ask 3 questions, the person answers those correctly. You ask the VP level question. This is what you would do. Okay. Um, and then if the person does that right, you're going to answer the EVP level questions as well. And that's something which is there. Is this logical? Right? He's ready for an upgrade. Absolutely. Yes. If he does those right, he's ready for an upgrade. Maybe offer him stock options after that. Right. But I mean, the thing I want to tell you is a lot of people think that how the GMAT works is, there's this complex black box and so on and so forth. No, what the GMAT is trying to mimic through an algorithm is what you and I do when we hire people. Okay, so the test by itself is very logical. There's no complex algorithm out there. I mean, it's sophisticated when it comes to the execution of it, but it's not complex to understand from that standpoint. And it's very logical. And if you take a logical approach to preparing for the GMAT, you guys can reach that EVP level. On the other hand, if the person does not answer these questions correctly, so if the director level questions, the person answers those incorrectly, then you really just say, okay, this is where I'm going to really say, let's kind of ask him manager level questions. If those questions are still wrong, the person then asks these questions over here, which are an analyst level, and these are the easiest questions. Most people answer those correctly. That's kind of, in a sense, how the GMAT also works. There's a question picker on the GMAT, which is where you can really see that question picker decided that this guy needs an upgrade. He needs to get difficult questions served to him, whereas this guy needed to get easier questions served to him. So there's a question picker that decides which questions to be served, and then based on your responses to those questions, it makes a decision on the next set of questions overall. Okay. Um, if you think about just from a statistical standpoint, student 1 got 5 questions. Each one of them was either at the average difficulty level. This was the first question, which was at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. Student 2, or case 2, got just the first question at an average difficulty level. Every other question that this guy got was below the average difficulty level. Okay. Now, Very similar to what you see in your organizations, an EVP makes a lot more money than an analyst does. Uh, a difficult question has way more points than an easy question does. So a difficult question typically can have as many as 3.5, 3.5x as many points in simple math um, as an easy question does. So it pays to be in that zone where you're solving difficult questions. Okay. If you're an e-GMAT student, you've seen that, in your Scholaranium, or even while doing the course in our quizzes, we actually show the question weights to you. So you've seen, how what weights do difficult questions have, and which is where sometimes you may get 6 out of 7 questions correct, but your score is 80%. Why? Because the question that you got wrong was a difficult question. It had more points. Okay. So when it comes to acing the GMAT, you have two challenges there. One is to make sure that you get difficult questions served to you, so the question picker serves those difficult questions. The second is to make sure you answer those questions correctly. Bhavya says, if you're leaving a question and answering it, are both rewarded equally? No, and I'm just not. I'm not going to go into the math of why that's the case, but don't leave a question on the GMAT. Randomly mark an answer and just move forward is what I would say. So it's much better to answer it incorrectly for most people than to leave it blank. So that's just take that over there. Why do stochastic models work that way? Don't ask me that, but just don't leave it blank. Okay. So we talked about this. Now this was uh, uh, essentially anecdotal data that this was just an example, an illustration, a logical illustration of how the GMAT works. Now I'm going to show you some examples, some anecdotal data over here. This is GMAT attempts from students in the 2018-2015 era. Why am I showing you data from 2018 to 2015? Because in the pre-April 2018 era, the official mocks were on a desktop software which was called GMAT Prep software, and that software had about 4 times as many features as your current mocks do. And essentially, though, that software allowed us to kind of take a peek into how the GMAT works. And this was unparalleled insights that the GMAC started upgrading that software from 2014, and they kept on upgrading it till 2018 when they stopped it completely. We actually still have the exe files of that software stored somewhere, just so that if you want to study the GMAT, we can go back to it. Why? Because post that, they haven't changed the algorithm, they've just shortened the test. So if you want to study the algorithm, it's a phenomenal tool to do that. Now, what you see over here is data from 2 of our students, and you can see there are 41 questions. That's the verbal section. Most of you worry about the verbal section, and what you see as the primary difference between these two students is that this guy got the first 2 questions wrong. And the reason why I have this is to really just tell you how flawed accuracy can be as a measure on the GMAT. So this guy has 11 out of 41 incorrect. Okay, 11 out of 41. This guy has 9 out of 41 incorrect if you just do the math. And you can see the spacing beyond question number 11 is very, very similar. So there's very little to take away from either one of these guys if you look at data beyond question number 11 or so. If you just looked at them through the lens of accuracy, you would hope once again that they get very similar scores. Okay, the reality is very different. This guy got a B43, which is a 97th percentile on the GMAT. So it was a 97th percentile then. Right now, I think it's a 96th percentile. But either way, what the test told him was that, hey, you are among the top 6,000 students who've taken the test. This guy got a B32. What the test told him was that there are 70,000 students who are at the same level or above you. Okay. How many of you, when you see this and say, man, this is really, really scary? How many of you were scared when you saw this, that, hey, I'm going to put in a yes, no poll over here? How many of you were scared when you saw this? So this is really scary. I could go from a very high score to a very low score. And Bhavi has asked a really good question. Top 6,000 for what period? It's typically in that 12-month span. Thank you, Bhavya, for that question. Let me end the poll. Let's get a few more responses. The question is, how many of you were scared when you saw this? I have 38 responses. Let's get to 60 once again, man. This is, are you scared? If you're not, then select no. If you are scared, then select yes. Either way, there's nothing to lose. 50 responses. How many of you were scared? 3, 2, and 1. We're going to stick around with 50 responses. That's okay. Yeah. So 86% of you were scared. And another 14% said no. Those of you who were scared, why were you scared? Why were you scared? What's scary about this? Because one mistake can be that fatal, okay? A poor start ended up with a drastic end, all right? There's one mistake, okay, hard to get back on track. All right, okay. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for those insights. That's helpful so that I can address those pieces. Okay. Now, many of you, did you not? Uh, 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 so, first of all, don't be scared. Let me just say this of the GMAT. And I want to just go back to what we talked about on this whiteboard. I'm going to bring that whiteboard again. Let's kind of always go back to this model. This is something that works on the GMAT always. If you are at that EVP level over here, if you are at this EVP level, and let me just make this blue right now, and it probably won't be exactly blue because I'm colorblind, so I end up using purple when it comes to blue, and please let me know if it's purple. So if you're at that EVP level over here and you make mistakes, you answer, you answer 7 out of 10 questions correctly. 7 out of 10 questions correctly. Is that bad at an EVP level? If you're at an EVP level and you get 7 out of 10 correct, is that bad? No. No. It's absolutely not bad. Okay. And so the piece which I want to make sure that when you look at this is, I'm going to go back to the presentation over here, is that this guy over here who got 97 percentile, he made mistakes. He made 9 mistakes out of 41, or approximately a quarter question, 22.5%, 22% of questions he got them wrong. He got them wrong at when the questions were difficult. So the GMAT allows you to make mistakes. You can make you can get a quarter of the questions wrong, and still be among the top 6 percentile of students. How great is that? I mean, think about it this way. Forget about this guy, but isn't this great? You can make a quarter of mistakes and get a quarter of the questions wrong, and then still be among the top 6,000 students, or the top 3 percentile of test takers. Just think about it that way. Isn't that a wonderful thing? If I just showed you this test in isolation, okay. No, but there's no caveat here. There's absolutely no caveat. Let me just be very clear, and you'll see some of this. Then the question is, how do we explain this? And the answer to this is, don't focus on accuracy. Right? As I said earlier, a lot of people focus on accuracy when they're practicing the OG. Accuracy on the GMAT's a really flawed measure. GMAT doesn't measure accuracy. And that's why we started with that first example where both students got 3 out of 5 questions. One did a lot better than the other. This is kind of the translation of the same example into real world. And so in this case, the reason why student 1, this guy is our student 1, got a much higher score is because the test served more difficult questions to him, and he consistently answered those questions correctly. These accuracies over here, 9 out of 41 incorrect, 11 out of 41, they have some role to play, but the difficulty level of questions served to them have a much higher role to play. Okay. No, time and limitation is not a consideration. The GMAT doesn't take into account how long you took to solve one question. Of course, you have a fixed time on a per section basis, but not on a per question basis. Herman says, I'm unable to finish the verbal section. I took the GMAT official test earlier this month, and as a result, I had to guess the last 7 to 8 questions due to time constraints. I find myself taking a lot of time on 3 question types. As a result, I scored V23. If I have to take the question, as a result of, I'll take the GMAT again. Any advice? Yes, change how you solve questions. Let me just say this. The very fact that you got a V23, it's not because of timing. Okay, even if you answered each of the last 8 questions incorrectly, you would have gotten a higher score than V23. Okay, you lost the test way before the last 8 questions. So timing is not your problem. Timing starts to be an impediment once you hit that V35 zone. Before that, it's your ability. Okay. And that piece over here, the first 15 questions ought to be correct. Myth. Myth. Again, let me bring this part over here. I'm going to bring that whiteboard again until you get sick of that whiteboard and say, okay, now we know the answer. This guy over here, right at question number 1, you have this candidate. Okay, we get another. Question number 1, you have this candidate, or question number 2, you ask him an EVP level question. That person gets it wrong. Do you think you'll hold that against that person? If question number 2 is very hard question and you get that wrong, will you hold it against that? Absolutely not. The GMAT works the same way. Good. I'm going to share ESRs with you. So anything that we say, we'll back it up with data. So I'm going to share ESRs with you of people, 770 scorers who made mistakes in the first 10. So remind me to do that. Okay. Herman, ask this question. We're going to solve an SC question. I'm going to remind me. I want to ask you, how you solve that question overall. Okay. Is the GMAT harsh? The answer is absolutely no. It's not a harsh test. You can get 97 percentile despite making 9 mistakes. Okay. So absolutely not a harsh test over here. So if you can't really figure that out, how the test is scored by accuracy, okay, then how is the test scored? Then let's kind of really worry about this piece over here. And the test is scored using ability. So when you look at these two students, remember their accuracies. Now, looking through a lens of accuracy, again, please hold off your questions, and then we're going to, in about 10 minutes, 90% of these questions, you'll have great answers to them. If you still have those doubts, you can ask those questions then. So, but hold them off for 10 minutes. Okay. So remember, focus on these guys. Accuracies. Very similar. So if you can't distinguish folks using accuracy, how do you distinguish them? It is using ability. So the V43 guy, internally, the test was evaluating his SCCR and RC ability, and these were his ability scores. And the V32 guy, these were his ability scores. The thing that I wanted to visualize is these are the inputs. Okay. And this score over here, this is the output. Now, when you look at these guys through the lens of ability, do they look very different? The answer is absolutely yes. 95th percentile ability here, 66th percentile ability here, 95th here, 81st here, 87th here, 59th here. Don't they look very different when you look at them through the lens of ability? Yes. And that's what the GMAT looks at. Has anyone seen an ESR? Has anyone seen an ESR? No. ESR is something that's called an enhanced score report. When you take the GMAT and you want to actually so it's kind of your post-mortem of essentially your overall GMAT attempt. Let me show you. How many of you are members on GMAT Club? If you are a member on GMAT Club, I'm going to share a link in response to Daniel's question, which is why asking the question in a Q&A pod is really good. You can click on that link, and in that link, you'll see the two ESRs. One a 700, the other one a 770 ESR. And if you download the 770 ESR or the 700, you will see that this person has made mistakes in the first 10. I think he's made 2 mistakes in the first 10. Okay. So that's something that is there. So looking at these students through the lens of ability, they look very different. This is what you need to look at. You need to measure your abilities in these subsections to so that you know how ready you are for the GMAT. Okay. Again, why? Because your GMAT score is governed by your ability. And when I say ability, it's not an abstract measure, it's a definitive measure, it's a quantitative measure. Your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. So when you think about ability, you have to ask what ability scores uh, uh, does the GMAT test, and on quant you have 2 ability scores. You have arithmetic and algebra, and on verbal you have 3 ability scores. So your quant score out of 60 is composed of these 2 abilities, and your verbal score out of 60 is composed of these 3 abilities. Certain things that you've got to note. When it comes to each subsection, it is independent, which means your ability score in SC is independent of your ability in CR, which is independent of your ability in RC. One subsection is not more important than the other. You may have more questions in RC than in CR. It's just that the GMAC needs more questions to get a reliable estimate of your ability in RC. That's why you have more questions. But when it comes to the role that it plays in, when it comes to that score out of 60 or that score out of 800, they play an identical role. Now, there are many ways to reach a certain quant or a certain verbal score or a certain GMAT score. So depending on what your natural strengths are, you need a target ability score in each subsection. You need to aim for that ability. Don't just study where you think, I'm going to practice 1,000 questions and then see what score I get. Focus on a target ability. Have a target ability for SC, have a target ability for CR, one for RC, and achieve that. And if you go that way, you're going to find you probably will need to solve 1/3 as many questions. Okay. Now, the process to build ability, to go from where you currently are to where you want to be, regardless of whether you're talking about number properties or sentence correction, it remains the same. And in your starting point in each of these subsections is likely to be different. And which is why I say take a Sigma X mock, because that will tell you your starting points in each of these subsections. Okay. Do I recommend that you guys become a member of GMAT Club? Yes, there is some helpful stuff out there. So yes, but if you are an e-GMAT student, don't blindly solve questions on GMAT Club. In fact, you won't even need to solve questions on GMAT Club. We have that many questions. Most e-GMATers don't, because the stats that you get within the e-GMAT platform are 2 generations ahead of any stats that GMAT Club can provide. Okay. So coming back to this, when you think about a certain GMAT score, you've got to ask yourself, what ability scores are you aiming for in these areas? That's really, really important. Okay. So here's just, you can make mistakes and still get a very high score. So there's a student who went from a 520 to a 710, and this guy went from a V17 to a V40. In fact, if you go on GMAT Club today, you'll see one of our students who's had a very similar a 190 point score improvement as well. He's gone from a V17 to a V36. Just to really tell you, such high scores are important now, are very achievable. The other thing that's really important is you can see that V40, which is the 91st percentile, is composed of these ability scores in SCCR and RC. This is a screenshot from the ESR, and you can download this as well. Okay. The other thing that I want to show you is that this guy made mistakes, a lot of mistakes, upwards of 12 mistakes here, and he got a V40. And the reason I want to show is because the other guy got a V32 with about 11 mistakes. Here, this guy has a V40 with upwards of 12 mistakes. So again, accuracy is not a measure. The important thing is you've got to figure out where you make mistakes in this case. And you can really see, he got most of the medium difficulty questions, right? It's not don't read them as the first 10 questions. Read them as medium difficulty questions, right? Why? Because his ability was there. Okay. Then, as questions became more difficult, he made more mistakes. As questions became more and more challenging, he started making mistakes. Again, which is why I say, here this guy got half the questions wrong, still was able to get to a V40, which is the 91st percentile on GMAT verbal. Which is why I said to the other student who said I lost the last 7 or 8 questions, and that caused me to get to a V23. No, those won't. You lose your plot over here in the first 20. You don't lose the plot over here. This is more or less a maintenance area. You want to maintain that ability. The first two blocks is where you get to that ability. Okay. How long does someone like him take to get to this score? It's about 300 hours of effort, but 300 hours of good, diligent effort also. Okay. Bottom line is you can make mistakes as long as those mistakes are on the hard question. Again, very similar to that hiring example. Go back. If you're at a VP, EVP level, if you make mistakes, that's okay. Those are supposed to be hard questions. If you are at a VP or an EVP level, you're not supposed to know everything. If you knew everything, then you probably should go look at a different company anyway. Okay, so let's kind of look at a few questions here. Do the first 10 questions matter? Every question matters, and yes, the first 10 questions do matter. So the answer is yes. Should you approach them differently? Don't do that. Absolutely not. Why? Because if you have the ability, and if those questions are medium difficulty, you're going to get them right anyway. Okay. If you approach them differently, what happens is that you lose that natural ability. I'm going to talk a bit about this. Should you be spending more time on the first 10? No. If you spend more time on the first 10, that's when you'll actually fall short on timing later on. Okay. So, how many of you really just say, "Hey"? How many of you say? How many of you start with this feeling or have taken the GMAT and said, "First 10 questions, I can't get anyone wrong, so I'm going to spend more time on the first 10 questions"? And how many of you have done that? Okay, don't do that, because it's very likely that a couple of questions in the first 10 may be extremely hard, because the way GMAT picks the question is, and any one of you mathematicians or have a solid background in just stochastic or probability theory. Yes. So typically, how the question picker works is it says block one, I have a certain median difficulty, I have a certain standard deviation. I'm going to pick a block of questions that lead to that median difficulty level. And so it may just be that you may out of the first block, with 9 questions on verbal, you may get 4 medium difficulty, 2 easy, or 3 easy, and 2 very hard. That could happen because in the end the difficulty level has to equal up, and that could happen because it's all picked out of a distribution. It's not a, a, a certain defined difficulty level, and so if out of the first 10 you actually get 1 difficult question wrong or 2 difficult questions wrong, is the test going to hold that negatively against you? Absolutely not. It's not going to hold that negatively against you. Okay. So on the other hand, if you get the first 10 and if it so happens that those couple of difficult questions are in an area which is your weakness, and you spend a lot of time on those first 10, guess what's going to happen? 2 things are going to happen. One is you're going to waste time on those, which means you will have less time on the next set of questions. The second thing is your confidence would be low, which means when you get the next set of questions, you would not have your complete focus on it. How many of you have suffered this? How many of you have suffered through this? Right? Don't, again, focus on the question level. Your job is not to answer every question. Tell yourself, if you're answering every question, you're in a bad place. If you find questions that you're unable to answer, that's good, because the GMAT's been able to figure out what your ability level is. And that's all right. Because a couple of other things I want to talk about over here is that a lot of people, how many of you go into the test saying, I'm going to perform really well on the test. Yeah, I may be scoring 650 on my mocks. I'm going to get 700 on the test. Okay, absolutely bad attitude. Don't have that attitude. And again, some of you may be surprised that I'm saying that. I'm just being realistic. I'm telling you, when people do that, they actually underperform. I've seen just so many of those cases. You you don't win or ace the GMAT in the test. You win or ace the GMAT during your preparation. Your test is a mere expression of that preparation. And if you try and play tricks on that expression, 9 out of 10 times you end up underperforming. I just want to make sure I repeat that point. You don't win or ace the GMAT during the test. The test is a mere expression of your preparation. You win or ace the GMAT during your preparation. Okay. And if you try and do something differently, then essentially you more often than not are going to fail. How many of you over here know a game of cricket? Or how many of you don't know? Not, of course, there are people who are international as well. So, if you prepare a set of shots during your practice in cricket and you go to a high intensity match where you are against a tough opposition and you try and play a slightly different set of shots, as a batsman, what's going to happen to you? Just to be clear, you're going to fail. You're going to get out. Why? Because if you're trying to play tricks that you have not prepared for, then you're against a tough opposition. The tough opposition is going to see that you've not prepared for those tricks. That's kind of what a tough opposition is about to be. If you can answer that question for cricket, why can't you answer that for the GMAT? Why do you try and be like that batsman who tries a different set of tricks than they have than they've really prepared for? Okay, so you lose or ace the GMAT during your preparation. Remember this. Okay. Now let's just tell you who's a 90th percentile student, and this is to really just tell you why is that you shouldn't worry about the first 10 questions. If you're a 90th percentile student during your preparation, okay, if you are a 90th percentile student, this is who you are. You can answer medium difficulty questions with 90% accuracy. You can answer medium hard questions with 80% accuracy. And you can answer hard questions with 65% accuracy, which means you're going to get 1 in 3 hard questions wrong. That's just the definition of a 90th percentile student. Okay. Now, if you truly are a 90th percentile student during your preparation, and if the first block throws medium difficulty questions at you, are you likely to get many of them wrong? No, you're not likely to get many of them wrong. On the other hand, if you treat the first 10 questions slightly differently, what starts to happen? This statistic completely goes out. Why? Because you start to second guess yourself. Sometimes when you second guess yourself, what happens is you mark the correct answer and then essentially you kind of doubt yourself and then you mark the incorrect answer. What happens then? Then that 90% number translates to a 75. This goes to a 75 then. Okay. And that's when you underperform. Right? Bhavya has a question. How many errors are allowed in the first 15? You can make, I mean, if Bhavya, if you download Jim's ESR, the 771, you'll see he made about, in the first 20, he probably made about 3 or 4 mistakes. It's not about the absolute number of mistakes. If you're still looking at mistakes, you are still focused on accuracy. It's about um, it's about making mistakes on difficult questions. Okay. Again, why do you? Is that even a relevant question? How many mistakes are allowed in the first 20? Because you, while taking the test, you can't figure out whether you answered a question correctly. That's not in your control. Okay. So again, don't worry about that question. What you need to worry about is how am I going to build 90th percentile ability in SC? And how am I going to measure during my preparation, not during the expression, but during your preparation, that I have reached 90th percentile ability. Right? Thank you, Bhavya. Okay. So that's the more relevant question for you. And people make mistakes. Magdalena, she made mistakes. She had a 780, a V47. She made mistakes on her verbal section. This guy got a V. She's Magdalena studying at Wharton. This guy's studying at Booth. V47 again. This guy made mistakes. Both of them. Someone was asking, "Can you do this in the first attempt?" Both of them did this in their respective first attempts. But they made mistakes. It's just that they made mistakes on difficult questions. They focused on building abilities. You can watch their video interviews on our YouTube channel, and you will see their focus was not on, hey, how can I answer questions quickly, or how do I approach the test. Their focus was on how do I get these kind of questions right, which is the same as building ability. Okay. Another thing that's really important is, when it comes to practicing, there are two kinds of practice tests that you need to do. And if you're an e-GMAT student, you've seen that. Um, we have test readiness quizzes and we have cementing quizzes. And the way you should take the actual exam is how you take the test readiness quizzes overall, or you take the mocks. Okay. Whereas in cementing quizzes, what you're trying to do is you're trying to really say, okay, if I spend even slightly longer, can I get this question right? But approach the test as you do in test readiness quizzes or so. Okay. How many experimental questions are there? There are 6 in on the verbal side and 3 on the quant. Again, don't need to worry about them. Why should you even bother? Okay. Can't know which question is experimental. It's not that they come with a marker there. Do they affect? No, they don't. They're experimental, but again, not a relevant question for you because no one knows which ones are experimental. Unless you take the ESR, you won't be able to figure out how many experimental questions in which area did you get. And again, that's post-mortem. Bhavya says, is it true that GMAT pinpoints you to the level where you get 50% right and 50% wrong? That's the ideal case. So if you are in that V34, V35 zone, you're going to get to that level. V40 zone, GMAT can still do it. But once you get to that V43, V44 zone, it's very difficult for the GMAT to come up with so many difficult questions. You are because those are uber difficult questions there, and then you still get 60-65% of them right. Why? Because just those many uber difficult questions just don't exist. Remember, the entire question pool needs to be refreshed every 15 days. I was interviewing 2 students of ours. Those guys, one of them had a 740, the other one had a 730. Both of them were friends, and they took the exam within a 6-day span. Both of them were discussing, and they said they got the same RC passage. They even knew the RC passage that they got, and they had a name for it. One of them had it during the last block, the other one had it during the second block. And so just to tell you, within a 15-day span, you're going to see, commonalities, and that's why you can't take the test within a 15-day span. But every 15 days, the entire question set is flushed. Okay. Do the optional questions affect score? They don't. If they're not graded, they can't affect your score. Okay. Excuse me. So let's kind of look at a personalized study plan. What is it then? Why do you need one? Okay. So far, how are we doing? Are we learning something? All right, good. I just want to make sure you understand how you think about the GMAT. Okay. And I want to kind of dispel all of those myths out there. Ankush has a great question, and I'm sorry, Ankush, it took me that long to get to it. It says, in case we are forced to take a guess due to time constraints, what's the best option, middle or last one or spaced out guesses? So always, don't be in that position, but let's say you are in that position. So the way I would go about taking guesses is between the quant and verbal areas, I know which ones are my strengths, which ones are my weakness. So I take guesses on my weakness. That's something which is important. And and so uh, so essentially, so two fundamental principles here. One is make a guess on in the areas of your weakness, not in the areas of your strength. You always want to maximize your score there. Um, uh, the second thing which is there is that that you make a guess on a question where after the first 35-40 seconds you have no head or tail, you have no clue how you're going to be able to do this. So make that's what I call as an educated guess, to really say, okay, you're not likely to solve this question, make a guess and move forward. Okay. Now, do you want to do it early on during the test or towards the end? I would like to keep it towards the second half of the test. And these are decisions that you should have. These should be coded in your brain right, 4 days before the test. This is how you're going to act. Don't second guess yourself during the test. Okay. So Ankush, hopefully that helps. Okay. Now let's talk about study plan. What did I remove my short answer pod? Here is my short answer pod. Here. I'm going to erase that. And thank you for the active participation. So let's talk about what is the job that a study plan has to do. So tell me, what job should a study plan do? Keep track of your progress. Okay. Keeps you accountable. The roadmap, a preparation plan. Okay. Efficient allocation of resources. All right. Perfect. Good. Really good. Okay. Okay. So at e-GMAT, a study plan is supposed to have three things. It's supposed to do three things for you. One is, it first of all helps you visualize, if you want to get that 730, what ability scores is that 730 going to be composed of, which is where the first question is, how will you reach that target GMAT score? Okay. The second thing that this is supposed to do is essentially, it's supposed to visualize how much time do you need to get to that target GMAT score, and how much time of how much time is going to be needed for SC, how much time would you need for CR, for number properties, and so on and so forth, um, over here. And then the third piece, which is there, is where do you need to put this time in, what part of the e-GMAT platform do I need to put this time in, and and which means, how much time I'm going to spend on learning the concepts, learning how to apply those concepts, versus how much time are you going to spend on cementing, versus how much time are you going to spend on essentially doing test readiness in that particular subsection. This is subsection specific, or so. That's something that it's supposed to do. Okay. So that's what a study plan does at e-GMAT. It answers three very specific questions. Okay. Um, just to really tell you how it does that, I'm going to take a case study. We're going to take the Harvard approach, the case study method to do this. Now, they take about 4 hours to do a case study. We're going to try and do this in about 14 minutes. So forgive me if I'm not as thorough, but hopefully I'm going to get my point across. Two students, Ayush versus Rafaela. Okay, very different starting points, but very similar target scores. Um, so Ayush came to us after he had taken the GMAT twice. He had a 670. He actually was waitlisted by Ross in Columbia. Rafaela came to us right before before her first attempt. She was recommended by a friend. Okay, so so how do you go about building that study plan? The first thing you've got to do is you've got to take a sigma x mock, figure out your starting abilities. That's your step number one. Step number two is add that data in PSP, and step number three is then execute on that plan. So, okay. So let's look at Rafaela. Rafaela took her first sigma x mock. She scored a 600, as you can see over here. She had a Q36 and a V36. She ended up with a 730, a Q48, and a V41. Okay. So again, how did she get that 600? She took a Sigma X mock and she got a 600 from there. And when you take a Sigma X mock, you get your starting abilities. So her starting abilities were what are were the abilities that are listed over here. So what are your observations when you look at these starting abilities? All right. I can see that many of you are saying weakness is RC and arithmetic. Needs focus on quant and RC. Yes. Um, the first thing I always say is not just talk about where someone's bad at, also appreciate where someone's good at. She is phenomenal when it comes to SC and CR. You know, really phenomenal over here, right? I mean, 90th percentile. Very few of you would actually be like Rafaela when it comes to SC and CR at this point. But at the same time, two major areas of weakness are reading comprehension, arithmetic, and algebra geometry is what I call it as at par when it comes to someone who's starting to prepare. At the 50th percentile, at the beginning of your preparation, that's an at par score. Everyone agrees with this? I know there are five numbers here. But simple to comprehend so far. Okay. Now let's talk about what her target was. So we added this data into our PSP tool, and what it does is it does a bunch of number crunching. It has about data from about 10,000 test takers. It looks at this and really says, okay, what's the best way, the shortest path, and the highest likelihood path, or in probabilistic terms, we call it the maximum likelihood method to get to her target score. And essentially there is some sort of a neural network built into this, where it says, okay, we don't want her to go beyond 90th percentile. Why? Because you go into a high risk zone. You can achieve up to 97th percentile. That's something that's there, but let's kind of be conservative here and keep her at 90th percentile, and then let's see what do we need to do. And then it took into account the algebra geometry piece and say, let's kind of improve that first and take it to a level that we are comfortable that she'd be able to reach, which is where it increased that to 83rd percentile. Then it says, okay, we have two other variables to deal with, uh, which is arithmetic and reading comprehension. And so let's kind of see what do we want to do. So because she was stronger in SC and CR, that really said, hey, let's kind of maximize her verbals. She seems verbals more natural to her than quant is. So it increased that verbal ability, RC ability to 85th percentile. And then it says arithmetic, the weakest area. Let's only improve it to a certain threshold that is needed to get to that 730 score. That's where it improved that to a 57th. Now, why is this important? That decision mark important at this stage? Why? Because if you know what ability levels you're aiming for, you actually spend your time accordingly. If you're not aiming for an 83rd percentile in arithmetic, you're not going to be solving the most challenging questions in arithmetic. On the other hand, in algebra geometry, um, you 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 uh, you're going to spend you want to be able to solve some of the most challenging questions out there, so you're going to solve difficult questions. Now this decision, you guys can make this within the first 2 days of your preparation. It's really important to make this decision. If you're an e-GMAT student, you've not made that decision, you've not made the use of the PSP tool, make sure you do that. Okay. But can you guys see how valuable these decisions are? Right? Can you see these decisions can be valuable? If you're an e-GMAT student, this is something that you can make, and you have access to our level 2 strategy support. So make those decisions. If you have questions about them, please write to them. We have 5 people who are there to help you. If you're not an e-GMAT student, we do give you what we call as a level 1 strategy support. So you guys can really get your study plan overall. So I can share a link with you for our level 1 study support. So you can get your study plan over here if you're not an e-GMAT student. But if you're an e-GMAT student, build your study plan. You already have access to the tool. And if you have questions, ask the strategy team. And yes, Atish, you will get access to this PPT. Yes. Okay. Um, from what I understand, we have limited slots available for Monday and Tuesday, but I think weekend slots are all done. Now, it's really important to be strategic about such decisions. Why? Because you know where you need to focus your energy. You need to mentally prepare yourself as to where you need to focus your energy or so. Okay, so that's something that is there. Now, the next thing it does is it gives you time estimates based on, again, the past data that it has seen. So it gives you an idea of how much time you need. Now, this your time can vary from it based on how seriously you study and other factors, but you have an estimate that you work with. um, and then it really tells you what you need to study on based on your starting abilities and then your target scores. Now, within the e-GMAT world, I'm going to take this link away, guys, because I think you probably have already filled this out. In the e-GMAT world, we have a very simple model when it comes to building ability. In the e-GMAT world, you first learn concepts and learn how to apply those concepts, and you learn those in an integrated fashion. This is where e-GMAT courses come in. This is where upwards of 100 points of personalized feedback on a per course comes in at this stage. Once you've learned concepts and application, we do a very specific thing where we want to make sure you improve your ability to an extent that as you go from SC to RC, you don't forget SC. And we call this stage a master application stage. We have very specific metrics for this stage, and we have a very specific set of quizzes that we do for this stage. e-GMAT students, what do we call this stage? There's another name that we call it internally. Can you type that? Cementing. Yes, we call this cementing. It's like when this stage, when you're building a wall, you've laid the bricks one on top of the other. Those bricks are strong enough to withstand a vertical force. Cementing makes sure that those bricks are connected together, so any lateral force comes on them, they can withstand that. And then for those of you who are aiming for extremely high scores, we do test readiness or refinement to perfection. That's where a lot of our analytics come in, and that's where you go from that 70th to that 90th percentile. If you do these stages well, by the end of first stage, at a bare minimum, you improve to 55th percentile. By the end of cementing or master application, you improve to a bare minimum 70th percentile. And then refine to perfection, you can go up to 95th percentile or so, depending on how well you do this. Okay, so these ones, hard thresholds over there. And from there on, this is kind of, we give you the refinement study plans for you. The analytics tell you which are the areas you need to improve on, and that's kind of where you decide if you how much effort you want to put in, because that's kind of very dependent on the amount of mental strain, and I truly want to use the word mental strain that you need to put in. And if you are truly have that wherewithal, you'll improve to that 90th percentile fairly easily. Okay, so now we know the starting abilities, we know the ending abilities. We've got to really figure out what you need to focus on, and for that, for a fail hour, you're going to see a certain legend. These are, when you see a tick, this means this is an area that she already has the ability, she need not study there. There's this orange circle with the dotted white thing on the edges. These are the areas that she needs to focus on. That's where she needs to put in her time. And this white bar with the minus in it is this is something that she need not study because she's not aiming for that high an ability. Okay, so this is an ability chart. Now we don't make this for you right away, but I recommend you take this and take this out of and make this for each one of you and have this on a wall for you. So on SC and CR, you can see she's already at that 90th percentile ability. She need not study any of it, which is why you see these ticks over here. All she needs to do is maintain her performance. In RC, really low ability, and so she needs to start from the very basics. In arithmetic, very low ability, so she needs to start from the very basics. In algebra, even though she had 49 percentile ability, because of the architecture of the e-GMAT quant course, where we build custom courses for you, and we do this in quant. So you start from the quant course, and the beauty about this is that the course just builds for you. So it has a series of diagnostics sprinkled across the course. Based on the diagnostics, it tells you what learning activities you need to do and which ones you can skip. It actually um, grays them out for you as you do that. So we always tell, even if you have 80th percentile ability, say go through the course, because the course will tell you what you need to learn, and you'll improve in the fastest way to do that. Okay, and we call this quant powered by pace. Pace is PACE, personalized adaptive course engine, and that's something that's there. Now, just this chart, does this seem logical, and does this kind of give you a vision of what you need to study if you were to build this chart for you? Does this give you a vision? And that's really, really important. Now, what should you start with? uh, Frankly, if I were this particular student, I would start with RC. Okay, first of all, the order in some ways is somewhat important. It's not as important. So I would start with RC. Why would I start with RC? Because the principle over here is you should always start in an area that you're comfortable with. Why? Because many of you haven't studied for a very long time. So the worst thing that you want to do is start your studies in an area that you're not as comfortable with. If quant is your strong suit, start with quant if you need to improve on it. If verbal is your strong suit, start with verbal if you need to improve on it. Again, the principle being, let's kind of ease you into studies. Why? Because as many of you would have experienced, one of the biggest struggles during the first week of study is, what is one of the biggest struggles? To find time out for studying, to consistently put in those 2 hours. Is that correct? Go back to that time when you first started to study. And at that point, what you don't want to do is, you don't want to take on a difficult topic. Why? Because that's anyhow going to repel you. So take on a topic that you enjoy. And because Rafaela is good in RC and she has practically no scope in SC and CR, or she's good in verbal and she's practically no scope in SC and CR, so I would say start with RC rather than starting with quant. Okay, now and that's one of those things when you're preparing for the first 1 week. Um, you know that first 1 week, your first challenge is to make sure that you study consistently for 2 hours. If you study consistently for 2 hours, give yourself a pat on the back. Why? Because you built that habit, or you've kind of started to build that habit. Very, very important. It's already too late for R2, and that's a more realistic goal. Maybe not. Can't say that. Depends on what your current point is, and essentially how many hours you can put in. So yes, for some of you that may be true, and for others that won't be true. Ask this question in about 30 minutes, and I'll tell you how my approach to this would be, just to really say this. So I don't want to deviate from the session, but I have my thoughts on how you can use this time and get in. If you still are going to apply next year, how you can leverage it this year and be at an advantage. Okay. Let's take a look at another student. Remember, we said we were going to do case studies. So Ayush came to us after having failed on the GMAT, and I say failed. I shouldn't say failed because he had a 670, which is a pretty good score. This guy had a Q50 and a V31. He came to us, so he had an official score already. We still asked him to take a Sigma X mock, and these were his abilities, and no wonder the guy was really strong in quant because his actual GMAT was there as well, and for him the problem was just the opposite. uh, he was not as strong in SC and CR. As you guys can see, RC was pretty good. Okay, so we fed this data into the PSP, and this is what came out of it, and said, We don't want to improve quant beyond a certain point. He wanted to get to a 750. Why? Because Ross and Columbia told him, hey, we love your candidacy. They actually even interviewed him, but they said, GMAT score is not good enough. So we got to do something about your GMAT score. So we're going to waitlist you. So we improved his verbal. So we said, let's kind of focus on improving your verbal. Very clear that he had his task cut out for him. So what are the time estimates that were generated for him? Again, he had to start from the very basics in both SC and CR and do, we asked him to do master application and refine to perfection, even in RC, even though he was at that 88th percentile. Why? Because you didn't want to make any stone unturned. He was there at that point where if he gets there, he was likely to get into Ross, which is a great school, or Columbia, which is an M7 school. Okay. So again, this was the chart that was there for him. No surprise, no need to study quant, only need to focus on maintenance here. RC, focus on cementing, focus on refining to perfection. SC and CR, do the whole works. Okay. That's something that was there for him. It took him about a month and a half to do this, and he was able to get to a 750. The fun thing was, once he submitted that 750 score, he didn't apply again. He just had to update that score. Both Ross and Columbia turned that wait list into an admit with scholarships. He got 50 grand. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can and type in Ayush Gandhi, e-GMAT, you can watch his interview. Okay. But just to really tell you, two people, one got a 730, one got a 750. They had very different study plans. Ayush spent a majority of his time on SC and CR, whereas Rafaela spent a majority of her time on RC, arithmetic, and algebra. And again, for the very simple reason that one had higher starting ability in one areas or one set of areas, and the other one had higher starting abilities in the other set of areas. And this is kind of the value of that personalized study plan that you need. Beyond that, Rafaela had to study entirely different things. So even where they spent time, if you go back over here, even where they spent time, RC, both of them had to spend time on RC. They studied really different things in RC, and just because of their starting abilities. So how much time you spend, what do you study, depends on essentially, what your starting abilities are and what your end goal is. Okay, this is the level of personalization that you need to do, and that's why I say, download this PDF, get those starting abilities, get those study plans, get that level of personalization. Okay. And this is really important. Doing this level of diligence is really important, because in the end, you want to go to a top business school, you want to do an MBA, and that 730 score or higher can really change how you get to whether you get to a top school or not. And you can really see why, because getting to that 730 requires a certain level of sophistication and a certain level of planning while working. And so schools really look for that in individuals also. Now, does a 730 or a 740 guarantee admission to an M7 school? Absolutely not, but it does increase your chances significantly. In the year 2021, we actually did this research where we looked at our students. When you have so many 700 plus scorers, you can do this kind of research. And this is at e-GMAT is the only place where you'll see this data point here. So we reached out to about 500 students. We did in-depth interviews. We kind of had them fill out forms over there with regards to their backgrounds and other things, and what kind of schools they applied to. And what we found was that when it comes to M7 schools, the admit rate, and most of these were international, of people were in the 700 to 730 bracket, their admit rate was 13%. And the admit rate of those in the 740 or higher bracket was 28%. Now, not perfect. Not everyone who had a 740 or higher got to an M7 school, but you can see that delta is but 2.15x. So it practically more than double the chances of getting into an M7 school, and which I think for a GMAT score to do is fairly impressive, and comparing two very close range scores or so. When it comes to scholarships, okay, we had a 740 plus score, but half of those people who got an admit got a scholarship from an M7 school. Um, if you were aiming for a school outside of M7, but in that top 20, 82% of folks with a 740 plus score got a scholarship. Combined, that number was about 62%. How many of you are looking for scholarships here? Right. Really important, especially with the dollar becoming more expensive, and you're looking at scholarships, yeah, that's between $20,000 to about $200,000 or so. And again, you look at our YouTube channel, you're going to see about 15 to 20 million dollars. I mean, interviews with students, and we total those scholarship amounts, you're going to see they're going to come to about 15 to 20 million dollars or so. Okay. Another thing which was very interesting was, what happens when you have a high score higher than 740? What about a 760? What's the delta between a 740 and a 760? So we had about 60, 65 students who were at a 760 or higher, and we had about 40 students who were at a 40, 45 students who were at a 740. So we had a reasonable number to compare. And one thing which was very interesting was uh, 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 was that 760 guys, they got way more scholarships, so about $35,000 more on a per capita basis than 760 scorers. Can anyone get 100% scholarship? Yes, I had 300% scholarships, Bhavya. So and a lot of them, again, if you go to our YouTube channel, you're going to see scholarships, 100% scholarships over there. And your scholarship depends on two things. One is your GMAT score. The second is your likability during the interview. And you do that, you're going to get a scholarship. Okay. As example, the students have gotten full scholarships. Victor got a full ride from Ross and Keenan Flagler. Um, you know, he the guy is not an American. He's from Tanzania, if I remember correctly. He wanted to make sure he got a scholarship. He actually improved his verbal score from 31 to 44 or so. Overall, he spent about $600 on his GMAT prep and MBA applications, and received more than 200 grants on scholarships. So talk about an ROI. Okay. Kong Bui got a 760. I think this was his first attempt. He got 5 full rides or 4 full rides, if I remember. But he got this wonderful scholarship from Ohio Fisher, where the school paid him $1,700 a month. So he got $1,700 a month in his pocket, in addition to not paying anything for this. So this, which by the way was more than his salary that he was getting prior to his MBA. Okay. One of the other things as you watch his interview is that the guy doesn't have doesn't have a proper, you know, smooth accent. He doesn't have any extracurriculars, but he was very organized when it came to his essays and it came to his interviews, and which is one of the reasons why he got not one but 4 full rides. Okay, we have an entire page, a portal. How many of you have seen, if you go to the e-GMAT website, the portal on admits and scholarships? How many of you have seen that? Okay, go look at it. All those interviews, and when you hover over these, you have links to their GMAT preparation journeys, their MBA preparation journeys. Go watch them. You can really see how they approach their GMAT preparation, and or how they approach their essays and interviews. And Bhavya, to your question, the likability during an interview, you can see that in general. They want to really understand how much are you going to um, contribute to the school. And Lana, I think, is asking that question. Where can she see that? So, Mansi, if you can share that link to with everyone, that would be great. Okay. And the reason why we could do that is because, since 2021, as I said, 3 out of 5 700 plus scores reported on GMAT Club. They've been reported for e-GMAT, just to really show those stats over here. But 60% of all success has been reported for us. 40% is combined for all of these prep companies. And a lot of you know us for verbal. When it comes to quant, we've also delivered the most 700 plus scores. If you go to the GC review section and you look at just the Q49 plus scores over there, you're going to really see these ratios as well. So, and this is since the launch of Quant 2.0 or so. And some people like to talk about 5-star reviews. We also have about 3x as many 5-star reviews as anyone else does. Again, all of this data is on GMAT Club overall. Okay. What questions do you guys still have that I can answer? So hopefully do you guys have an idea of how to prepare for the GMAT? Yes, no? What doubts do you still have about your GMAT preparation that I can address? We are about an hour and a half into the session, and so where do you start from? Okay, take a Sigma X mark. Okay, does AWA matter when it comes to applying for an MBA, guys? That's good. So AWA matters, yes. I am a very firm believer. It's not just I'm a very firm believer, but also the very fact is one. How many of you know that your AWA, the essay that you write, B schools have access to it? How many of you know that? So it's not just that score, but the actual essay goes to business schools. So if you have a great GMAT score, but if you have a poor AWA and then you have a flawless application, then B schools will wonder how the hell do you have a flawless application if your AWA is so bad. So yes, AWA matters. Make sure you get a 5.0 or higher. 4.5 is my bare minimum, but 5.0 or higher. And the beauty about this is if you prepared for the GMAT, preparing for AWA is about 3 hours of effort. So because you've already done well in CR. So Naren says between better work ethics and a good GMAT score, which has more weightage in NMB application. I think you're asking the wrong question. I think the goal that you have to ask is, you want to get to a top school. What role do you want your GMAT score to play? And because again, if you're asking that question, you're thinking of MBA admissions to be very similar to how in the US or in Europe or even at ISB to be very similar to how they are in India, where everything has a specific weight. In the US and in Europe, we don't work with weights. Each of these applications, each of these components has a role to play. So if you have excellent work profile and an average GMAT score, they will take you. Why? Because your work's pushing your candidacy up there. They will take you. They might not give you a scholarship, but you will still get an admit. So, can you get into Tuck with a 710 with an excellent work profile? Absolutely. Right? Now, if you had that excellent work profile and a 750, you would get into Tuck, but you'd get a $80,000 scholarship. So if you have an excellent work profile, clearly you're very smart. That's why you have an excellent work profile. And if you're that smart, then why would you not get a 750 if you can get a 710 and get 80 grand of scholarship? That probably is a logical thing to do. Similarly, if you have an average work profile and an excellent GMAT score, let's say 770, you would be hard pressed to get into Tuck even without 770. You may be able to get into a school such as a Keenan Flagler, for example. They would really do this, but and that 770 will definitely get you an interview at Booth, at Kellogg, at pretty much every top school. But if you don't have a work profile that's above average, then they will find you out there, and then they will not admit you. Keenan Flagler will, which by the way is a great MBA too, just to be very clear. But so it's not about between A or B, because it's not that you have a choice of your work profile or your achievements. Those are already done. What you have a choice of is your GMAT score. Does that make sense, Naren? Okay. In case of targeting an EMBA, what should be my ideal GMAT score? So there's no ideal GMAT score. Depends on where you want to do an EMBA. So that's there. But most people, if you're doing an EMBA, 720 works for pretty much everyone. So that's something that I've seen happen. Okay. Okay, if you could give my honest thoughts on time sufficient to make it through R2, I've seen students prepare for GMAT and parallel prepare for applications. No, really bad idea to prepare for the GMAT and prepare for applications. Bad idea. Now, if I were to look for, so there are three strategies that you could do when it comes to R2. One is tell yourself, okay, if you're at that 600, you want to get to that 730, then you're going to put an intensive effort for that 1 month. put in about 120 hours, get to that 730 or so, uh, and and um, and 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 essentially, even if you get to that 710, that's worthy enough, because you can always apply with a 710, and then once you've submitted your application, then you can take the GMAT again and update that GMAT score. B schools love that. That's not a problem at all. So, but option one is, you're struggling for R2, put in intensive effort, take the GMAT by first week of December, and then work on your application. I don't want you to do two things, especially if you're a working professional. If you're not a working professional, then you probably don't even have that question, because you can ace the GMAT in a month anyway. Then, okay, that's my strategy one. Strategy two is essentially say, I'm going to prepare just for the GMAT. I'm going to spend my 2 months. I'm not going to worry about it 2.5, 3 months. Put in those 200 hours, get a great GMAT score by January. Now I'm going to apply in R3. Remember, R3 exists because there are candidates that are needed. People get admits and scholarships in R3, and but with that caveat that I may get rejected. Now the reason why I'm applying in R3 in about 2 or 3 schools is to figure out where, how is my profile, how do B schools receive my profile, and I'm going to apply to definitely going to apply to Tuck. Why? Because Tuck will always give you feedback on your candidacy, even if they reject you. So that feedback's very, very valuable. I'm also going to apply to, I think, Ohio Fisher also gives you feedback. So schools that tell you what's not working for them, if they reject you, if they admit you, Ohio Fisher will also give you a full ride. So I'm going to use that R3 uh, as a test run overall. Does that make sense for the person who asked that question? Honest thoughts on R2? Okay. So those are, and EG Matters do both. So that's something which is there. Tuck, and I think Ohio Fisher does that. Okay. EMBA, with 15 plus years of experience, is it better to take the GMAT or EA? I think it's the same. Frankly, it's just we can, and using the e-GMAT course, you can prepare for both the GMAT and for EA. So it's the same over here. If you choose to prepare for EA using the e-GMAT course, you can write to us. So that's something that's there. But yeah, it's the same. B schools don't really care. So, Shweta is a material. For someone who's 12 plus years in experience is confused whether you take the GMAT or the GRE for a master's program, what do I recommend? Take the test that you're comfortable with. I mean, if you're looking for a business master's program, I always recommend the GMAT over the GRE. But yeah, uh, the GRE focuses more on on essentially the vocab piece of thing. The GMAT's way more logical. GRE more vocab, GMAT way more logical. So so that's something that's there. So but you know um, from whatever you're good at, the way I would go is take a diagnostic. I would look at which questions types I like, and then I would go from there. Okay. All right. Other questions? Guys, questions in the Q&A pod, not over here. Effort required for IR prep. I have to scan through questions if they are in the short answer pod over here. Um, effort required for IR prep. If you go through the e-GMAT SC verbal and quant courses, you need about 2 days to go through the e-GMAT IR course. We have an IR course that comes with every course that we offer. So, okay. Um, do we offer application counselors? No, we don't have application counselors. No, we don't do that. Very simple, because we can't do that for thousands of students. We strive to be number one in everything that we do, and we strive to do it for a lot of people. And this is something that we can't do. If you're looking for an MBA plus public policy, the Harvard Joint Degree Program, yes, that's a really great program. Is three in private, is work experience good? Cursory comment. Again, the count looks good enough for me. You have a good mix of public and private. What you've done over there, that determines to be thing. Do you have an advice on working on the communication side of SC? Okay, let's do that. Let's talk about SC. How many of you want to talk about SC over here? Just please. Okay, let's talk about SC. All right, let's talk about SC over here. I'm going to talk about the communication side of SC. So why is it that people get stuck at SC over here? So I'm going to compare two students. You see them on the slide. Um, you know, both of them have very similar ability. That's kind of where you see the overall capability at the bottom. Very similar capability, very similar starting point. Both of them spend about 40 hours on SC. One of them reaches the 60th percentile, um, and the other one reaches the 90th percentile. You're going to really see why that's the case. And the difference in this is how they think about what GMAT SC tests. The 60th percentile student really says GMAT SC is about learning these error types that you see over here. And I'm going to learn these error types. I'm going to make sure that I know every rule that's out there. And the moment I look at an SC question, I'm going to scan for splits to really say how are the answer choices different. If I can't figure anything out, I'm going to really kind of focus on the meaning. Okay. Uh, who does this? How many of you over here go about doing this and approaching at it over here? Wrong way. GMAT SC is not a test of grammar. Okay. For them, they focus on going through any piece of text that's given to them, and they do some quizzes over there. But after that, they focus on solving a bunch of official guide questions or a bunch of questions on GMAT Club. And when you think about those 40 hours, 30% of those hours are spent learning, 70% are spent practicing. For those of you who basically said I do this, you probably, that's the split that you guys are doing. Am I correct? A lot of time, a lot of practice questions after reading the theory. Absolutely wrong way of preparing for SC. Absolutely wrong focus in it. A 90th percentile student focuses on completely different things. That person learns those error types, that's there, but that person focuses on learning sentence structures and their interconnection between those sentence structures. That person over here does not focus on learning rigid grammar rules. Why? Because that person understands when it comes to GMAT sentence correction, grammar is always slave to meaning and logic. Okay, elegant grammar is not what GMAT sentence correction tests. It focuses on precise meaning. It focuses on communicating that meaning. Okay. For them, splits is not the primary method. Meaning is the primary method to solve questions. They focus on building what I call as a visualization muscle. And then I plan to do a webinar on building that visualization muscle and verbal for both SC and CR. So if you are part of GMAT Club and our YouTube channel, you're going to see that. For them, they focus a lot on building that visualization muscle, which is where in their learning phase, which is where 60% of their time is spent. Again, remember the same 40 hours we're talking about, they get a lot more feedback than they focus on working on that feedback. And 40% of their time is what they spend practicing questions. And the reason why they spend only 40% is not because they don't want to spend more, but because they don't need to spend more. Okay. What resources for learning verbal? e-GMAT course. It's the industry standard when it comes to verbal. As you saw, you saw 3 out of 5, 6, 700 plus scores who were from there. Those guys do the e-GMAT course. Okay. The question that you have to ask yourself is, if there are about 200 sentence structures out there in SC, how do you know you've achieved perfection if you only get feedback 7 to 10 times? Can you figure that out? I mean, you don't have enough data to really say that. Jake, have you tried the e-GMAT free trial? How many of you have tried the free trial? The verb ed concepts or the verb ing concepts? Tried? Okay. And if you've tried the free trial, you would see how you learn things, how we build that ability to visualize. Okay. So focus on building that try the free trial out. You'll see learning there is very, very different. The way you learn, the kind of feedback you get, the way you're evaluated right while you're learning is very, very different from learning from a book or so. Okay. Navi says, can we move across, from one plan to another? First of all, Navi, all the plans are the same. They just differ by duration, so you don't need to move across plans. We offer everyone the same thing. It's just they differ by duration. So, okay. And just to really tell you that what the meaning-based approach is, and how many of you have heard of meaning in SC? Okay. How many of you know e-GMAT invented the meaning-based approach? If you go back to GMAT Club, go back to Be the GMAT, you can see posts from 2011, 2012 where we talk about the meaning-based approach. You'll not see a post from any other expert from a test prep company till 2016, where they use the word meaning in the context of GMAT sentence correction. So we invented the meaning-based approach. Payal Tandon, my co-host, she invented the meaning-based approach. In fact, if you Google 5 strategies that GMAT uses to change meaning, you'll see a 2012, 2013 article on GMAT Club that has upwards of 100 kudos on the meaning-based approach. So let's kind of illustrate that meaning-based approach. I want to be very, very brief. My goal here is not to teach you that meaning-based approach. My goal here is to illustrate how to use the meaning-based approach while solving a difficult question. Okay. So we remove broadcast results. Here's a question that here's an SC question. It's an e-GMAT question. Try this question out. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, so go real slow. Choose the correct answer. All right, guys, another 20 seconds, get those answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results so you guys can see how you guys have participated on this. Three choices, four choices are pretty popular. You have choice C, which is 41%, choice C, which is 28%, choice D is pretty popular, as is choice B is reasonably popular. Four people have chosen it. Okay. Now, one of the things that I wanted to emphasize on again, you can see the choices over here. So, what I emphasize on is that I am not here to teach you GMAT sentence correction. I can't. I have about 10 minutes over here, but I want to impress upon the difference in approaches. And because a lot of people think of GMAT sentence correction as a mapping of rules and pattern matching, and which is the absolute wrong way of approaching GMAT sentence correction. Okay, and when I say pattern matching and rules, pattern matching is where splits come in. And when you think about this, this particular question, splits don't exist, and that's kind of where we wanted to force you towards the meaning based approach to do that. Really, so let's kind of see if we force you to it, can you then do it? Okay, why do splits don't exist? Because you can see you have two startings with the church coined, two with while the church coined, and then one with that the church coined. So just the main differences, but just from the beginning, there are four places where you have the word but, which is a contrast word, but choice C doesn't have that. Then you have sentence structures which are very very different. By the way, sentence structures are fragments that connect to a sentence to 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 really arrive at a meaningful to a complete meaning or so. And so there are many other sentence structures. It's really difficult to apply the splits approach because a the entire sentence is underlined, and b just the sheer number of combinations that exist over here. So again, you're forced to use the meaning based approach. So let's kind of see the meaning based approach. How does it work? Because that approach works on every question, whether it's a 500 level, 600 level, whether it's completely underlined, partially underlined, every question it works. Why do you think the meaning based approach works on every question? Why do you think the meaning based approach works? Any idea? What's the role of a sentence? No, it works everywhere, even on the GRE, by the way. It works everywhere. What's the reason why it works is because of what the job now. So, what's the job that a sentence is supposed to do? It's supposed to communicate meaning. And I want to really talk about two words here, communicate and meaning. The job of a sentence is to communicate a meaning. So the reason why meaning based approach works everywhere is because you focus on understanding the job that a sentence is supposed to do rather than worrying about grammar rules. Grammar rules merely make sure that you communicate the meaning in a way that is that is that is universally acceptable, which is under the universal rules. But the whole point of any sentence is meaning. Let's kind of really look at a sentence here. To a sentence, the simplest sentence. The sentence is wrong. What should have been the correct sentence? Okay. Someone says he runs. So option one, he runs. He ran. Okay. Well, depends on the meaning. Let's not go to ran because there we're changing the tense. He is running. I'm surprised. What about they ran? They run. Why not this option? You know, what you're really saying is this one is a subject verb error because subject verb do not agree in number. They run could be perfectly okay, right? So how do you decide between he runs and they run? If you look at this part over here, there's absolutely no way you can make that decision, right? If you just look at this part. But if you say he runs as the sentence, you know we're talking about one single person. If you know they run as the sentence, you know you're talking about multiple people. My point being, the reason subject verb agreement exists is so that you know what the meaning is, or that there is no ambiguity when it comes to meaning. The whole purpose of grammar is meaning. When you focus on grammar, you leave the purpose behind. You understand what I'm trying to say? We focus on grammar, we don't worry about meaning, but you forget why grammar was constructed to begin with. It's to remove that ambiguity as to what is it that I'm trying to communicate. And this is illustrated in the simple sentence, and you're going to see that illustrated in this complex sentence as well. Okay, let's look at this over here. And one of the first jobs that you have as test takers is to figure out what is it that the author wants to communicate. And to do that, you have to pause strategically. Now, remember early on in the session, I said, don't worry about timing when you're preparing. For the first 60-70% of your preparation, focus on building skills. This is an example of the skill you need to build. Why? Because why should you not worry about timing? Because building the skill will require that you spend more time than 2 minutes to do this, because you're building a skill that requires investment. Okay. So the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, um, and blah, 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 blah. You guys have read this. The thing that you have to really say is you've got to strategically pause and let's understand what is it that the sentence is trying to communicate. So if you've gone through the e-GMAT Master Comprehension course, we tell you how to pause strategically. We tell you how to split the sentence into sentence structure, and we tell you how to extract meaning. But I'm going to skip those steps because that's another 6-hour course which tells you just that, and then we kind of reinforce that in another 40 hours or so. But essentially, when you think about it, what is it the sentence is trying to communicate? It gives you two claims about why February 14th is celebrated as Valentine's Day, right? That's the first piece. It gives you two claims about why February 14th is celebrated as Valentine's Day. The first claim is the church designated with a specific motive. The second claim is that it was to honor the anniversary of Saint Valentine's death. Okay. Now, there's another aspect that it wants to communicate. So, this is an aspect that it wants to communicate. This is the second aspect that it wants to communicate. The third aspect that it wants to communicate is that claim one is given by one set of experts, claim two is given by the second set of experts, or it's a more prevalent belief. So, it's what common people believe in all of this. If you were to infer this, the author is not making a claim. The author is a communicator of information. He's just transferring information to you, but he's not saying I believe claim one is true or claim two is true. We've not even looked at grammar. All you've said is what is the job that the sentence has to do. Read the sentence once more. Can you see the jobs that the sentence has to do? Yes, no. Can you extract these things? Can you see how these are extracted from it? If we have two claims, the church did it with one motive. So those and the claim two is to honor this. Claim one is by one set of a few experts. Claim two is the more prevalent belief. Now, I want you to tell me which of these aspects did you not take notice of? Uh, and this is a multiple response question while solving the question. Which of these aspects did you not worry about while solving the question? Mark them. Which aspects did you not worry about while solving the questions? 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. And you can really see 67% of people chose aspect 3, which is claim 1 is by a few experts, claim 2 is by the more prevalent belief. And this is where, because you'd see that this aspect leads to most mistakes that people do. And as we get to the correct answer. Okay. So far, you guys with me? Yes, no? Is this so far simple? Logical? Okay. If and the reason why this is important is if you got all the three aspects, you're great. Meaning is not the reason why you made a mistake. It probably is translating that meaning into one of those answer choices or a grammar rule that you don't know. But if you lost on one of these aspects, before even you worry about studying grammar, focus on extracting the aspects. That's something that's really important. That's why at e-GMAT we ask everyone to go through that master comprehension course so that you get to extract the aspects. You learn how to do this. There's no point learning grammar if you don't know how to extract these aspects from various sentence structures. Only when you know this, that's when grammar is useful. Okay. And this is where we talk about strategic pausing and extracting meaning in this. Now that you've figured out the meaning, now we're going to really look at the sentence structure. And one thing that you would notice, again, I'm not going to teach that. We teach that in good detail in the GMAT courses. You will see what I call as hanging subjects. Hanging verbs. So you have these verbs over here. They don't have the subjects. You have a subject to appear here. You have a subject to appear here. But is claimed does not have a subject. There's a missing subject here. And this word is has a missing subject too. And which is why choice A is wrong. Other than that, choice A has no other error. It's a perfectly valid meaning. The meanings is very clear. It's very logical. The only problem is there's a subject verb error. And one of the other thing that you would notice is pretty much every official question has a definitive error. You would not. A lot of people really say this is this kind of error, which is one of those, uh, archaic error rules. They try and justify this. No, most 700 level questions have meaning issues, and if they have an error, they'll have a definitive error, like a subject verb error, or the verb tense with regards to the meaning. It makes absolutely illogical sense, or is absolutely illogical. Okay, now we did that. Let's kind of go to choice B. This is your original choice. This is choice A. These are the three aspects that we have. And this is choice B over here. This is choice B in this case. While with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, a few experts do claim. A few experts is right next to the ulterior motive. What choice B is communicating is that the ulterior motive now belongs to a few experts. What is the original meaning? Who had the ulterior motive in choice A? What did the author want to communicate? The church had the ulterior motive. And the reason why this answer choice is wrong is not because, grammatically there's anything wrong. If you were to use this sentence independently, the sentence is perfectly fine. There's no grammar error in this. But when it comes to what the author intended to communicate versus what the sentence is communicating, it's not the right meaning, and which is why this is wrong. Remember that this is not illogical meaning. In a completely different universe, the experts could have an ulterior motive, but it's a meaning change. That's the error that we're talking about here. Okay. Let's look at choice C. Choice C says, while a few experts claim that the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive, blah, 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 their more prevalent belief. Original aspect was claim one is by one set of experts, claim two is the more prevalent belief, but of the general population. Here the word there refers to what? Who does the word there refer to? The experts. Again, meaning change error, not an illogical sentence. Okay. People who did not focus on aspect 3 chose choice C because it's really well written. It's beautiful. It's elegant. It addresses the subject, the missing subject error, but it changes the meaning. What grammar did you need to know to solve this question? Did you need to know any sophisticated grammar? I mean, so many of you chose choice C. Let's just see if I can reduce that. Did you need sophisticated grammar for to reject choice C? No. It was merely a good process. Okay. The only place where there's any sophistication in this is choice D. Okay. And in choice D, I'm going to use the word, make sure you understand the usage of the word as. And this is something which is tested a lot in reading comprehension, and it's tested in difficult SC questions. So let's take a very simple sentence. Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. Okay. When you say this, are you communicating information? Yes. Are you making a claim here? Are you making a claim here? In this case, absolutely not. Should you be blamed if it turns out that Apple is not the market leader? No, you shouldn't be blamed. Okay. Really important piece. Let's take another example. Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. Now, in this case, are you communicating information? Yes. Are you making claim? Yes, you are. Why? Because you're backing Forbes claim. You're saying Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. What you're saying is Forbes magazine claims that Apple is the market leader. And by the way, I agree with that as well. That's why you're using the word as. And so if it turns out that Apple is not the market leader, then you will be blamed. Okay. Have you seen this used in RC where, especially in inference questions, this is very commonly used where the author merely provides information and the question asks, what can you infer from the passage? And if you choose a statement where in the passage the author is merely stating that statement as as a communicator of information, but not as someone who as claiming that information, and you say the author that's an inference, then that's a mistake that you make. Very commonly tested on RC, and is tested on difficult SC questions. Okay, so the difference is, first one, you're a communicator, you cannot be blamed. In the second one, you are the one who's making the claim and you will be blamed. Okay, when you look at choice D is the one at the bottom here, as claimed by a few experts. The author is now backing this claim, which is not what the author intended to do. Okay. Similarly, the more prevalent belief, the author is backing this claim, or say. Um, so because of this, choice D for delta is wrong. Which brings us to our correct choice, which is choice E. Okay, that the church coined the date February 14 is claimed by a few experts, but the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated. Again, two claims are there. That's perfect. The claims belong to the right people, and the motives are absolutely correct. This is your correct answer. A lot of people reject this. Why? Because they say, hey, what the hell is this sentence doing with that? Why is it starting with that? How many of you did that and said, hey, why is it starting with that? That seems really weird. How many of you did that? Why? What's wrong with it? Some people really say there needs to be a that over here. The belief is that it is celebrated. And some other people say, hey, this word is claimed as passive over here, so it has to be incorrect. Passive voice is incorrect on the GMAT. Again, the key thing over here is when you want to focus on errors on the GMAT, focus on definitive errors. Don't focus on errors that are speculative. Passive voice, absolutely correct on construct. There's nothing wrong with using passive voice on the GMAT as long as it does not change the meaning, or as long as it does not curtail the meaning. Should that be there? No. Why? Does it? Again, remember this. There are very few deterministic grammar rules. Don't confuse good usage to a grammar rule. Okay. At the end of the webinar, I'm going to share the recording of our SC session. You can really see this. But again, go take a look at the free trial and see. This is how we teach SC. This is how people who score 700 of the GMAT focus on SC. How many of you are have subscribed to our YouTube channel? How many of you? Okay, if you've subscribed to our YouTube channel, one thing that you would notice is that we publish 2 success stories every week, 2 every week. And if you look at any other prep company, they probably publish 10 a year. We publish upwards of 100 a year. And as you publish them, you're going to find that pretty much everyone talks about transitioning from that focus on grammar to that focus on meaning. And when they did that, SC became a lot easier. Okay. So again, one of the things that you can really see is that, a lot, just this sentence had about 12 sentence structures in there. And to be able to extract meaning, you had to make sense of how these sentence structures connected with one another. Really important to really learn that when it comes to GMAT SC. Okay. And it's not that you go from 0 to 90th percentile in a go or even in a session. It requires a lot of persistent effort, which is why it's 90th percentile. If frankly you could do that in 2 hours, 90th percentile would be 60th percentile. That's why only 10% of the people get there. And which is where it's really important to start with building that foundation and get that feedback over here, then learn the method, get that feedback over here, then refine on this, have analytics, and get that feedback over here. And when you get that feedback, you act upon that feedback, you build in good habits. That's something that's when you get to this. Now, good habits, another very important piece. How many of you, when you make a mistake and you take a quiz, revise that quiz and make notes within a day? How many of you do that? How many of you do that? Make notes within a day? Most of the time, okay. Only half the time. Within the e-GMAT course, we actually track this. We go through the e-GMAT course. If you're an e-GMAT student, you look at the quizzes. You would see there is in the quiz results screen, we really show how much time you spent on reviewing the solution. We show when did you start the review. Did you do it um, uh, uh, right away? Did you do it within 24 hours, or did you do it beyond 24 hours? And we actually, if you do it beyond 24 hours, we mark a red against you. Again, the goal is to inculcate good habits. Now, when you're learning the foundation, we give you uh, 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 about 80 points of feedback. You're learning the methods. We give you another 30 points of feedback over here, and refinement is depending on how much refinement you need. Sometimes you find it difficult to create a takeaway. That's where you should really think about and really say, why is it that's a problem? Because if you made a mistake, you should be able to figure out why you made a mistake, and the takeaway should be there. In this question, for example, your takeaway needs to be spend more time if you forgot to extract some of the aspects of the meaning, and essentially say, I'm going to spend more time extracting all aspects, and then while I'm evaluating the answer choices, I'm going to really map those against the aspects that the sentence was supposed to communicate. Okay. If you go on our website, we actually show you how we give feedback. These videos actually play. So if you click on this, you're going to find how we give you feedback over there. Okay. Um, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. Again, experience the free trial, see why 3 out of 5 700 plus scorers use e-GMAT, and go create your study plan. Okay. Let me share the session PDF with you. What data do we have on habits of top performers? We have lots of data. I can tell you a few points over here, and this is where you should look at and really just say, watch some of those interview. First thing that top performers do is essentially they make sure that they spend consistently. They spend time on the GMAT consistently, and they have the same time slot that they study. The second thing that they do is they focus on learning. They don't focus on taking a ton of mocks. They focus on learning, and they focus on learning, and they focus on learning from every mistakes that they do. Let me just share one video so that you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel over here. The third thing that they do is they focus on only one thing at a time. They don't study SC and number properties together, because they know in an hour and a half to 2 hours of study every day, it's not going to be possible to learn uh, lots of new things. The fourth thing that these guys do is, while they study for just 1.5 to 2 hours, they apply what they've studied throughout the day. So if you've studied sentence correction, let's say you've studied modifiers, while reading during their work, they look at, are the modifiers used correctly. While communicating, they focus on emphasize on making sure that the usage of modifiers is correct. That verb ing modifier either talks about the result of the prior set of nouns. Okay, so those are some of the good habits. But if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you're going to see a bunch of other good habits, and you're going to see their commonalities across this. Now, with regards to data points, we actually have about 500 to 700 data points for every person who's succeeded, and 500 to 700 data points for every person who's failed. Everyone who takes the e-GMAT course doesn't succeed. Um, but those who put in the effort, 80% of them score 700 or higher. That part's there. Okay. With that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those questions. We already took quite a few, but if you still have anything that's left, that's there. I'll be happy to take that. If you can't download the PPT, then if you're on a mobile device, that may happen, Bhavya. I'll be sharing the PPT also in the recording. You'll be getting the recording. You'll get the recording in about 10 hours or so. And yeah. And if you wanted to book that, you can book your call over here. And hopefully you guys like the session and you find it useful. Take a look at the free trial, attend the geometry session tomorrow. And yes, I'll be sharing via email. If you don't get it, you can write to me at rajat at e-gmat.com. And if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, you guys can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, how to book a call? The link up there, it says get your study plan. If you click on that, you can book a call using that. Okay, but you should be able to download the session PDF. I think I can download the session PDF. Let's just make sure. Yeah, I'm able to download it. Okay. So, all right, perfect. Yeah, if you're on a mobile phone, you're gonna find it difficult. Let's see if I can give you a download link for the session PDF. Stay with me for a second. I think I should be able to give you a download link for the PDF. We have this on Dropbox, so you just see. Try clicking on the link that you see, Bhavya, over here, and others can try clicking on that as well. So, so, and others can also, if you can click on that link, that should work on mobile too. Okay, perfect. That's good. That's good. I want to thank everyone for being here. I know for some of you it's Saturday night your time, and for some of you it's Saturday afternoon if you're in Europe. And I saw someone was from Cologne or Cologne. I lived in Bochum, Germany for about 5 years. The best 5 years of my life. Absolutely loved there, and I played cricket against Cologne's team. Um, so thank you for being here. And if you're from India, It's evening your time if you're from, for me, like Phoenix, Arizona, it's morning your time. So thank you for being here. And I hope to see you guys on egmat.com. All right. Thank you and have an excellent day.